I'm Rob Welcher, and I teach at Urban Prairie Waldorf School. I'm teaching the rising second grade next year, and I want to tell you about the Waldorf Teacher Institute and why I chose it and why I think it could be a good choice for you. I used to be a college swim coach and teacher of biomechanics, and I left it behind because I wasn't a fan of recruiting, but I wanted to get back into teaching, and I looked at some different programs, and I was looking at ones in Boston, Philadelphia, and Chicago, and I got accepted to a couple. But at the same time, I also started hearing about Waldorf. It came up in reading. I had a next door neighbor whose child went to Waldorf, and I felt the universe was trying to tell me something. And I'm like, okay, maybe I should listen. But I definitely came into it as a skeptic. I had not heard of Waldorf before, and I'm a child of public education, and I'm like, this is for rich people. You know, I came in very kind of like snooty approach, like this is not for me. But then I started learning about it. I met a couple teachers and learned a little bit more. I'm like, okay, let's investigate this further. And I went and took a summer workshop, and I was intrigued. I still wasn't convinced. I was still feeling very skeptical. And I sat down with another teacher, Frances Vig, and she told me some stories of her students that she had had, some who could afford the school very readily, and the things that they learned that they would not necessarily have learned in a traditional public school, but also families who thought it was so important that they sacrificed or they scrimped and saved to send their child there. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this. I think this philosophy is worth it. And she also talked about why it is private, and that's to be independent, so that the teachers and the faculty can choose these things that are different than what are happening in traditional public schools, that when you accept government money, doesn't allow you to do. And hopefully someday this education can be available for everybody. I really think it is something that will speak to so many children. I felt seen as a whole human being, that it wasn't just an intellect, which is for many years who I was. I was a kid who was like very much, let's do math and let's think and let's forget about our bodies and things. And it saw that I was more, the teacher saw that I was more than just that, and that I have artistic capabilities and things that speak to my soul and nourish me, and I felt that this education would nourish me, and it did. It pushed me. I learned knitting, and I painted and drew, and I felt like I have no talent for this, but as I practiced it, I got better, and it expanded my capacities beyond what I imagined they could be. And I still am striving, and that's something I appreciate about too, that there's always a striving to be the best that you can be, and that you are not finished. It's life is a journey, and that, yes, now I can draw some, but now I can draw better. I can learn how to do different techniques and things like that. And seeing that this is how they approach teaching children, so that things like music, physical education, art are integral to education. It nourishes the whole being, and I just find it beautiful. And again, I came into it as a skeptic, but I have felt transformed myself through the education that I received in the teacher program, and feel like I am more artistic. And my main dance form, my main artistic form is dance, which I'm not necessarily teaching the children, but I've delved deeper into it because I feel more secure in myself as an artist, as a whole human. And I see that happening with the children, that they have more capacity than just reading and writing and math, that there's so much that they can do and want to do, and through that they learn the reading and the writing and the math and hearing stories. And that was one of my favorite things, was hearing the stories and telling stories, and how wonderful it is to have an audience that's captivated, whether it's a fairy tale or it's a tale of Joan of Arc or of something more historical, more recent. there's something very, I want to say primordial, that's not the right word, but very like just deep down human that touches us through it. So if someone's thinking about doing this teacher training, my first is do it. Even if you don't end up becoming a teacher, you are going to find out more about yourself and you're going to transform through it. And if you become a teacher, you're going to have this depth of self-understanding and understanding the world that then you can bring to your students. And I think that's, as I reflect on it, a really big part of it, that I'm not just teaching history that's in a book, but that I've taken the time to look at history and question it. And especially in this day and age, as we look at things with COVID and race relations and all those things, like, what did I learn in the past about it? But what do I understand it now? How do I examine myself to then go back and look at the world again? And I'm teaching my students to do that by being an example and teaching them to look at the world. That's the first thing I think about when I taught high school science at the Waldorf school before I was teaching the younger grades. When I taught in the university, it's like, here are the facts, and now maybe we'll do an experiment that shows it. But when I was teaching high school sciences here, it's like, I show them something, ask them to observe it, then ask them to make their own conclusions. And then depending on how it goes, maybe then I will give them the facts, but it's always from their own observation, their understanding of the world. And I think that's such a powerful thing in this time to look into the world and question it, and to not just take it as it is, but to examine it more deeply. And I think that's so important at this time. Again, I came into this as a skeptic. I'm like, Waldorf, that's not for me. But once I opened myself up to it, I found there was so much beauty and the appreciation of the beauty of the world. And I feel like it's transformed who I am. And if I step away from teaching tomorrow, I am a different person than I was when I started the program. And if you're still skeptical too, come in and talk to some of the teachers or talk to some former students and ask them what their experience was and what the relationships are. And I think that's a big part of it too, is the relationships. That when I was a class advisor in the high school, those are still students that I keep in touch with. And there's other students who weren't necessarily in my class that I keep in touch with because they impacted me. I know I impacted them, but they impacted me. And then I'm thinking about my current students who are about to be second graders. And they're my kids. People ask me, do you have any kids? And I'm like, well, no, I don't have any children that were born to me, but I have this whole group of children that I love and they adore me, and it's wonderful. And I get to share their stories about their teeth, and I get to tell them stories of the world and sing songs with them, and it's joyous. And this last year when I was teaching first grade was the hardest job I've had in my life. It was exhausting and it was challenging, but every single day I smiled and was filled with joy from it. I definitely felt very connected to the other students in the teacher training, and it was very much, I felt very much part of a community of people striving and learning. And yes, some of them happened to be much better drawers than I was, but they were never looking down on me. It was always an encouragement. And there were things that I was good at that they're like, oh, like that we were pushing each other, helping each other to strive, and to question the world, and to question our own understanding of the world. And being able to do that and talk those ideas out with other people is profoundly impactful for me.